assumptions underlying AI. It's almost everything that we assume we know about the world, about education, and about the future. We have a massive piece of work to do now to make sure that our academic staff are confident. This will touch every single person, and almost every single person has already been touched by AI.
Welcome to another episode of Relearning Work, where we dive into the future of learning and work. In each episode, we bring you conversations with leaders from industry and education to challenge assumptions, propose ideas, and share learnings as we all navigate this world that is being reshaped by agentic AI. Now, whether you are an educator, a student, or a business executive looking to stay ahead, this rapidly changing landscape, there's something in it for you. I'm your host, David Yip. And today I'm joined by Professor Jessica Vanderlelie. She is Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic at Deakin University, steering the education and employability outcomes across more than 60,000 learners. She's an Australian Learning and Teaching Fellow and led the National Revisiting Alumni Engagement for Graduate Success program. In 2016, she became the inaugural Innovative Research University's Vice-Chancellor's Fellow, coordinating 7 universities on student success, employability, and learning analytics. Recently, Jessica has been an advocate for universities taking on bold and transformational initiatives in a world that's rapidly being reshaped by AI, warning her peers that the days of being a content business are over, and highlighting that AI-first universities can personalize learning and protect equity by scaling support to underserved students. Jessica also champions cross-sector reform as Deputy Chair of Universities Australia's DVC Academic Committee and a member of Advance HE's Australasian Strategic Advisory Board. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, that is an impressive background and a long history in student success.
It's certainly a passion. Have always loved working closely with students, and I think the best part about my job now is I get to lead at a university and work collaboratively with my peers to think about what's next for student success, which is really exciting.
Yeah. And I love your background bringing student success and really closely linking it with employability. That's a topic that we all talk about, and especially now with universities really getting focused on the ROI of education, right? Students are increasingly taking on quite a significant financial investment in order to go through universities, not just in terms of time, but also the dollars. The degrees are getting really expensive, and the ROI is actually really important. So employability is really getting into focus. So that's really good to link these two things together. And having done so for so many years as well, you've seen it evolve. And now in the age of AI, we need to think about it not just differently, but take action urgently too.
Yeah, and there's a piece for me in how we think about education, not as you go to primary school, secondary school, you go to university, but really now, what is the future educational model that will really serve people across the life of their careers? I'm not sure the sector has fully grappled with that yet. I'm not sure that industry or even the community have really figured out what the need is there. But if we are going to deliver on the outcomes that are set out in the Accord and really be able to create a workforce that is fit for today and the future, people need to be able to feel confident and comfortable to learn in ways that suit them. And I'm really excited about the opportunities for us to philosophically think differently about how universities can support people across their lives.
Yeah, it is a very special time now. And yes, you're absolutely right. We do have to rethink a lot of things. And I always ask this, early question for all my guests as well. In order to think differently, we have to get into the right mindset. And in order to do that, we have to understand some of our underlying assumptions. Otherwise, we can't think differently, even if they're the obvious answers in front of us, but if we might not see it. So from your point of view, in, I guess, the current world of AI and transformation, what are some assumptions that we actually have to be aware of, but which we may not actually be aware of in order for us to get into the right mindset for thinking differently?
Oh, it's a big question. And when I think about assumptions underlying AI, it's almost everything that we assume we know about the world, about education, and about the future. If AI has shown us anything, or that development over the last couple of years, it's that we are not ready to be able to think about the application of this technology in a completely comprehensive way. So for me, the assumption is, firstly, that we can control what this is going to look like and what our future is going to look like. Can't control anything. I think the second assumption is that our existing models will serve us into the future. And one of the limitations that I'm seeing in the way that we are considering AI is we are trying to make AI work within the constraints and constructs that we currently have. And how do we fit this into our existing model is often the way that people are coming at this problem. So rather than thinking about how do we adapt our assessment to AI, he stepped us back and said, do we even need assessment? And if we need assessment, which clearly we do to be able to assure learning, what is the most appropriate way that we could be thinking about assessment? Why are we going to use it? How are we going to use it? Rather than going, oh, I've got exams, I've got assignments, and this is now we're going to shoehorn a solution to AI into that. So
I love that.
it was awesome.
Yeah, love that, because that's one of the things that we immediately think about, right? An assumption. Oh, we do education. There must be an assessment and there must be an exam, or it must be this and that, because that's what we've done for the past 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah,
AI is kind of flipped on its head.
Yeah, I must test your ability to recite all of the things that are in there, when actually AI gives us that information far more readily. And what I care about is that you can think about that information in a critical way, apply it in an ethical and considered way, and it's less about what you know and more about how you're using that information to make a difference. So it's super cool.
Yeah, actually, you bring up a really good point. It's less about what you know. Thinking about AI, using it for a little while now, I actually think that is quite a big change in how we think about education, because education has always been about giving you more things that you know more things, right? Gaining knowledge. But knowledge is with these fantastic AI tools, even before with Google, right? It's actually easy, very quick to actually get access to, with ChatGPT even more so. So gaining knowledge, is so easy now. But actually, finding the answers and finding solutions, but asking questions, finding knowledge, or the right pieces of knowledge, right? Asking the right questions and being, critically interrogate a problem, that's actually quite difficult. I've certainly found it. At first, I thought, prompting, is quite straightforward. Ask questions easy, but the more you do it, the harder it actually is. Asking questions, knowing how to ask questions.
For sure. Yeah. How do you ask the right questions, but then also how do you interrogate the answer that you get to know that like, how do you know if your AI is hallucinating? Like, how is it making up what it can find in that blank space between the simple answer and the more complex component that you're looking for? I think that is the challenge for education now, is to start to think about how do we train learners to be able to critically interrogate what comes from AI, but also to be able to overlay our uniquely human perspective in how we would apply that knowledge. So I think that's the big shift. Do we have a workforce that's able to to take that and think differently about that in the context of higher education? Actually, I don't think we do. I think we as higher education institutions and as a sector more broadly, we have a massive piece of work to do now to make sure that our academic staff are confident, are capable, and are able to understand enough of the affordances of AI to truly be able to think at that next level about what education in an AI future really means for their discipline. And we're starting those conversations, but we're certainly not moving fast enough.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple of points there, which I really want to flesh out some more. The scale of the problem and also the speed which we need to move at. But talking about the scale first, your point about staff and capabilities around staff. I think one of the things, and this goes back to assumptions as well, is there an assumption with the teaching staff that they're supposed to know all this, that students when they go to them with all these questions, they're supposed to have all the answers because they're the professor, they're the person lecturing about this. So what do you do in that sense when everyone's learning together? And it's okay not to know everything, but
Exactly.
to be able to help people to learn together.
And I think there's a really powerful opportunity. We've seen it across the sector. Students as partners has become an emerging thing over 10 years now. There's been some amazing work by Kelly Matthews and Molly Dollinger and others inside Australia, but also internationally. And I think it's a really important time now to say that we are all learning about AI and our disciplines right now. And yes, academics don't have to be the expert. That makes us uncomfortable. I'm a biochemist, made me incredibly uncomfortable if I didn't know the answers to the questions that students were going to pose to me. But I think it brings us to a new way of thinking about education as true co-creation of knowledge and understanding and application. And that, I think, brings us to a far more engaging place for learners and for teachers. So I'm not teaching in the classrooms at the moment. It's something that I'd love to get back in and do. And I think this is a really exciting time to be an academic. It's an exciting time to be a student. But at the same time, it's a really scary time to be an academic because what we know about our work is changing and we don't have a clear answer. And that's difficult for anybody. And we saw it in the Industrial Revolution. We're seeing it now. How you support workforce and community more broadly to be able to embrace AI and to be able to be compassionate and agile all at the same time, I think is a unique challenge we'll need to face together.
Now, it is true. I guess academics, they may not have all the answers, right? And in fact, a lot of students would probably know more about AI than the academics. However, one thing the academics do have in bucket loads is they know how to ask, they know what questions to ask. They know how to ask questions. And that's the skill that students have yet to really pick up. And rather than academics, trying, doing what they've always done, imparting solutions and answers. Now it's like, let's work this thing out together, but we can show you how to ask questions.
And that's learning facilitation, right? And at the end of the day, I know if I think back to the times when I was teaching, it was some of the most rewarding activity that's part of the reason why I'm doing the job I'm doing now. Like I deeply loved learning and teaching and being part of that creation of knowledge with students. I think where you had space in the curriculum or in the teaching environment to be able to step back from the imparting knowledge part, because that was at the time when I was teaching, that was a lot of what was expected of us, that we weren't using online platforms to sort of do a lot of work in that space.
Now you mentioned applied, a few times, and I think that is definitely one of the biggest things in AI. How do you and teaching and learning in the world of AI is to take all this knowledge that AI can just surface so quickly, and for the academics to be able to help students to make sense of that and critically look at that. More importantly, then once you've looked at it critically, so how do we apply it? the application of knowledge is now more important than ever. But it's one area that, how do you see that in terms of the university's, I guess, capabilities and practice today, imparting knowledge versus helping with the applied aspect of it?
Look, I think there are disciplines that are naturally more applied than others. So there are a lot of clinical disciplines in health that are all about applied teaching, and there's many other examples. I think the opportunity we have as a sector, which we talk about a lot, is about engagement with industry and deep engagement with industry, co-creation of curriculum, industry-based teaching, not just in workplaces, but industry co-teaching applied examples with academics and students. My sense at the moment is there's some pockets of good practice where we do that. The creative arts is an example area where for years they've been very good at bringing industry in to work with them. I'm thinking back to the fellowship that Nicolette Lee led a long time ago, looking at capstone projects, and there were some fantastic examples coming out of the creative arts through her work. And you hear it a lot in conferences, that higher ed conferences. How do we get industry to partner more deeply with higher education? And we haven't quite ever really cracked it holistically. And again, I think it comes back to that question about assumptions. We're trying to push industry often into an existing model of education that works for higher education providers, rather than coming back to the blank whiteboard and doing it differently. I think an example where that has happened, and I think is working to varying degrees, is the degree apprenticeships model. And that is, for me, that's super exciting because it's less of a bolt-on of learning. So you do your learning outside and then you have a job eventually, to really being able to learn and apply it in your job and use your job experiences as the foundation for your assessment and other kinds of reflection on what you're learning.
And that degree apprenticeships, that is very much, the core of that is how you apply, right? You take the knowledge that you learn and you apply it, and then you come back and you learn some more, then you apply it some more. The best thing about that as well is, as you're applying it, often these degree apprenticeships are paid. You're earning a salary, you're learning and you're earning at the same time. And whereas the traditional model was you learn and then you earn afterwards. Now I think it's moving to learning and earning at the same time.
Definitely. And if you think about, and I know the degree apprenticeships came up in the Accord. And if you think about the Accord and the big aspirational targets in there about improving access to education, particularly for underserved populations across this country, then giving people the opportunity to be able to work while they're studying, that's the thing we need. Whether it's a formalised degree apprenticeship or it is shorter form but subsidised educational experiences that allow you to develop the skills that you need for your job as you're working. Like, that's what our future workforce need.
I think that doing work, the opportunity to apply, and I guess as a product of that, once you've applied something, you gain experience. That for learners, for at least for students, for young people, is so important in the age of AI, particularly agentic AI, because you've heard the talk about cognitive offloading, and the thing about particularly AI agents being able to do a lot of and increasingly more entry-level jobs. So it's benefiting the experienced worker, the professionals who've been there for a long time, who've got the experience. But as agentic AI is taking over more and more the entry-level job, which traditionally has been what the graduates do, right? Then what do graduates do when they finish their degree and then start looking for a job? I think this is definitely a time for the education sector, the higher education, tertiary, TAFE, to really come together and think, okay, how can we give students that experience while they're learning? So when they graduate, they've already got some experience.
Yeah, and they're ready for the next level job from the beginning. Because what the biggest power of AI, or the biggest potential, the thing that makes me super excited about the revolution that we are experiencing now is that it means that we don't have, hopefully, we can do less of the work that we don't like not just because we don't like it, but because it's not the best use of our time.
Yeah,
It
the
it allows us,
repetitive, manual, yeah,
yeah, and it frees up our brains and our emotional spaces to be able to think more creatively, to connect more deeply with people, to be able to more authentic in the way that we're working. A long way over the fence of excited, but
yeah,
I also acknowledge that there are lots of people that are just as far, if not further, over the fence in the fear
yeah.
category. Yeah.
Now, the other aspect of it is, so you mentioned it at the beginning around the scale.
Mm.
A lot of people need to do things, and this is actually a big opportunity. How big is big? Let's really get a sense as to what is this scale that we're talking about, because big means different things to different people, right? There are programs which might be supporting hundreds of students, that might be big, or thousands of students, that might be big, 10,000 students, that might be big. How big is big?
Millions. Like it's everyone.
Yeah,
Like I think if we are back to your assumptions question, if we're limiting ourselves in the solutions that we make because we are trying to be too bespoke or think at too small a scale, I think we miss the biggest opportunity. How we go about achieving scale and balancing that with nuance is always the challenge. But I think this is a transformation of the whole sector. It's a transformation of every learner, and it's a transformation of the entire workforce. So like billions of people even
yeah,
that's the scale. This
yeah,
will touch every single person, and
yeah,
almost every single person has already been touched by AI, right? We use it every day, whether we know it or not. And
yeah,
how we see it impacting our work, this will be like us using a computer, right? It'll
yeah.
be like us using a phone. It's massive, it's everything. And yeah, I'm not sure we're fully grasping it. We're
Yeah,
hoping it'll just be smooth, like moving
yeah,
to a mobile phone or starting to use a computer.
yeah,
I think this will deeply revolutionize our work, and the part that will be difficult for us is to your point, the speed of change means that we're not even getting a sense of how we can even understand this technology and how it can be used, and then it's changed, and we have to learn again. So yeah, massive.
So if we need to think so big in this sense, and we talk about scale, it's to think in terms of millions. And so if we need to think in terms of millions, then pilots, then small programs, are in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, yeah, institution wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
And
think that's certainly how I'm thinking about it in the context of the work that I'm doing in the institutions that I've been a part of. It is, yes, you need to be able to pilot piece agents or other kinds of AI use cases on a potentially a small scale or in a shorter space of time. So how do you get agile enough to try something, figure out whether it works or not, put it in the bin if it isn't, and then trialing something different, which is
fast. Yeah.
not the way that we generally do larger IT application programs at universities. But for me, when I'm looking at particular types of technology use cases in the context of education, for example, I'm looking for pilot examples that will touch every student, that will touch every academic. And yes, we may roll that out with smaller groups to begin with, but I want us to be thinking right at the beginning about this is the problem that we're solving, and we're solving it for every single student.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of challenges that we can solve better collectively and save ourselves a whole lot of time, a whole lot of money, duplicating the easy wins from AI rather than then freeing us up to do the kind of
Yeah.
think really in a really cool way about what's next.
So think big, and big is in millions. which means pilots
Very.
are in the hundreds of thousands. That means institution-wide. Actually, not just institution-wide. What I really like your point about you have to collaborate with many institutions, right, between each other, because I think Deakin's a large university, more than 60,000
Yeah.
students, but 60,000 is not 100,000. To
Yeah.
pilot, then you have to work together with two or three other institutions
Yeah.
to see how does this work across a couple 100,000 students, and if it does, then you can scale it into the millions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it won't work, right? It won't achieve
Yeah.
the scale that we need to find solutions for.
Yeah. And I we are seeing some really good practice coming through now about bringing the communities together. So Danny Liu and the work that the University of Sydney are doing has been fantastic. And I think one of the big shout outs that I give to Danny and others across the network who have come together is about bringing groups of people together and about sharing application and being really generous with their knowledge and time and willingness to help connect people. And I haven't seen an example that has galvanized us as a sector as much as AI. And it's been great to see leaders like Danny and others really stepping into that space and helping us come together. So I think it's positive.
It is. It's positive. It's exciting as well, because how often do you get to take on a challenge, and really solve a problem for millions, right?
Yeah.
Where a small one is in the hundreds of thousands, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But
And I
the
think
other,
some of the American universities have been doing that too. I think understanding how we connect better with the learnings across the oceans, I think will be
yes,
important for us. And how we do that with other geopolitical kind of things that are happening in the world is always tricky.
well, there's an institution that I always really admire, ASU, Arizona State,
Yeah.
and Michael Crow, their president, makes a point of saying, they're going to be famous for who they include, not who they exclude, right? Like, because the
Exactly.
highly ranked universities, oh, we only accept 1% of applicants, but Arizona State, if you qualify, we accept you, right?
Yeah.
So if that means we're going to have 1 million students, then that's really great.
Yeah.
That's a different way and looking at scale, completely differently as well.
Yeah.
And they need to have a very different operating model, different partnership model to really tackle questions of scale like that. But so scale is one thing. What about speed? Because speed is something that usually institutions are not known for.
We're awesome at it.
Things
Yeah.
things are measured in years, if not decades.
Mm.
And AI is one of these things that is just spreading so quickly. I think what are the stats? OpenAI, ChatGPT, they were the fastest application ever. They reached 100 million users in a matter of weeks, I think it was.
Yeah. So there are, big challenges for us in terms of our risk appetite. It's a different way of thinking about technology applications. The kinds of conversations that I've been having over the last year or so have been more about, can we make decisions at an enterprise level about some types of technology that we may want to invest in that we think are, to that point, are safer kind of bets, if you like, versus this fail fast, try things, iterate, don't be afraid to put some money into a smaller company, for example, that might be able to help you solve a really niche kind of problem. I think balancing both of those is important, but even then it's really challenging the approvals kind of process, just the general planning process that an institution has. And I know a number of institutions at the moment that are thinking about, how do we create the right governance model, financial model, approvals process that allows us to balance speed, scale, and risk at the same time. And that comes back to the old system isn't fit for purpose in the new world. it may be that we need to run both. We need to have our more deep, like the slower process, I'll call it, and then the opportunity to push something up into the fast lane, and know that the rules for both of those lanes are slightly different, and be okay with that, because the risk settings for both are different.
Yeah. So developing like an ambidextrous capability.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. So I guess a couple of ideas then to really summarize. We need to think bold in the millions. Speed is absolutely something we need to do, but speed, not just completely, looking at speed and throwing out what good practices for large, stable projects. So being able to build out an ambidextrous capability, both fast and slow, depending on the context. Definitely in the AI space, we need to be able to experiment fast, but when it makes sense, scale it quickly.
Yep.
So I guess wrapping up now, I want to, and this is something I ask all of my guests as well, and this is education, and we've all had great teachers at one point in our lives and really made an impact and shaped our careers and got us to where we are today, and yourself being hugely impactful educator yourself. Who's been a teacher that's been super impactful in your life, and why?
If I can be so bold as to have two and connect the two of them
Yes,
together.
yes.
So there is one person who made a massive difference to me as an individual, and that was my grade 5 teacher. His name was Mr. Curfey. And when I first was in his class, I didn't like him at all. Sorry, Mr. Curfey, if you are listening. And the reason I didn't like him was he really was challenging us as a class to do our very best. And at that point, I had kind of figured out that you could cruise along at school and chat to your friends and it was all okay. And I got in trouble so much because, can you believe it? I talked a lot. But he figured out, he moved past my behaviors as an individual, and he saw a spark of what I could do and challenged me and sat with me and spent time unpacking the parts of my learning that I didn't understand. And I remember he spent a whole lunchtime with me talking about a maths problem. And the way he spent time with me doing that built my confidence, but it also pushed me to not be lazy in my learning. And from there, he completely changed the way that I thought about learning. He completely changed my aspiration in life. And I have often come back to that learning experience as an educator now. Can I see the spark of potential in every student that I have? Can I inspire someone to think more about what they can become as an individual than what they were thinking now? And for me as a leader, how do I create the right environment for that kind of an experience to happen? And I'll link it to the next person, who is John Dewar, who I know you have had a chance to have a chat with before. In my view, one of the most inspiring leaders that you could ever work with. In the same way, when I was lucky enough to get the job at the IRU as the Innovative Research University's fellow, John was my sponsoring Vice-Chancellor, so I reported to John. And again, he saw past the more junior academic that I was at the time, who had lots of ideas and lots of energy, and went, I think you have the capacity to really think strategically. He spent time with me unpacking what that can look like. He gave me lots of space, but he also challenged me and pushed me to the edges of who I was as a leader, and pushed me beyond how I was thinking about my career. And all the way through, I was lucky enough to then work with him at La Trobe. He had the same approach he took to me in my development as a leader, but he believed and gave me space to be able to keep challenging myself. And when I'm not sure if he saw me get comfortable, because I don't like getting comfortable, but he often came with challenging provocations that made me think differently. And that's the thing that I really needed in leaders around me. And there have been so many amazing leaders that I've been a part to work for. But Mr. Curfey and John Dewar took there was similarity in their approach in terms of finding that spark of potential in someone and giving them space to use it.
Well, I love it. I love hearing these stories. And especially, you talk about your fifth grade teacher and that lunchtime moment. I think, for Mr. Curfey, he may not have thought that lunchtime, few minutes that he spent with you had such a lasting impact, right? But I think that's what makes the education sector and being educators such an amazing path, right?
Yeah. And I can only ever hope that there is one student or staff member who I have worked with who has had a similar experience, because that's certainly been something that I've wanted to be able to give back to at least one person in the world.
Yeah. And John as well is such a fantastic person. I've been quite fortunate to get a lot of advice and support from him with what I'm doing as well. And just you're absolutely right. Just someone to see that spark of potential. It's amazing. Just the last segment is about plugs. So you plugged a current number of people, but what about, do you have any organizations, things or initiatives that you want to shout out to as well?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for asking. There's so many, but maybe I'll take us in a slightly different direction to others. And for me, what's been really important as an individual is what I think the things I've worked on my entire career, and I'm still working on it, is finding balance in my life. So how do I not get so excited that I get sucked into just the things that I'm doing all the time, and remind myself to keep coming back to who I am as a person, to my physical body, to the world around me. And I think there's a few parts to that. One of them, which I think I've mentioned before in other settings, is the importance for me personally of meditation and that practice. And if I give a plug to an app, it's called Insight Timer. If you've not had a crack at playing with it, amazing. It has everything from 1 minute to 2 hour and longer meditation, guided, unguided music, all weird kind of stuff that you can explore. But what I like about that as a platform is it brings people from across the world together, and they record their own and they put it up on the platform. So you get to explore this kind of international kind of community that gives you a space to come back to yourself. And the other plug I would give is to national parks across the country. So I'm an avid bushwalker, and to be able to spend time in nature and to really sink your feet into the earth, to hear the sound of wind through trees, to look from the top of a mountain. I just walked through Cradle Mountain National Park. I did the overland track. The most phenomenal experience. But I think as a society here in Australia, our national parks are really we don't often give them a shout out, and the work that those state-based and national parks authorities do in keeping those spaces beautiful, in having authentic relationships with the local Aboriginal communities, and just protecting something that should be the greatest asset in this country. I think amazing. Thank you, National Parks.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Well, that brings us to the end of the show today. And so thank you so much for your time, your insights, and the stories that you shared, Jess. I loved everything that you brought to the show today. And for our audience, thank you for tuning in. And we're looking forward to sharing some more insights for relearning work in our next episode.